And thank you for joining us on PM Express. We are 4 months on elections, and again, a big subject is emerging, something we are pretty familiar with, but the politicians always say, give us evidence. Corruption Watch found the evidence of vote buying. And tonight you will hear, I guess, one of the most controversial cases discovered by Corruption Watch in the case of Maslock, the deputy chief executive who contested in the MPP primaries in Yendi, is speaking out tonight with me. You will hear her on the show as he addresses this very important topic of the vote buying phenomenon in the lead up to the 2020 elections. Would it be a phenomenon again this year? Well, many watchers say it may well be. Now, as it's become such a major conversation for people, you recall allegations about vote buying during the NDC primaries. Yes, both parties can be accused of this. It is emerging again in the MPP primaries. We know that for certain now. Now, the deputy Maslock CEO found to have allegedly abused Maslock funds in a bid to entice delegates. She's on the show tonight. I'll give you details of what the Corruption Watch found. They uncovered that the CEO used state resources for her personal gain, particularly trying to induce the delegates to vote for her. She denies it, by the way. Just as other candidates were also captured by Corruption Watch, inducing delegates to get them to vote for them. I'll shock you with some of the statistics and some of the data they found. In her case, for example, the Corruption Watch found that she gave 1,000 cities to each delegate. In Yendi, there were about more than 600 delegates. 1,000 times 600, that's a lot of money to give out to people. Again, she gave out fertilizers to each delegate, not small money. Also, Alhaji Umar Farouk Aliu Mahama, who is the son of the former Vice President Aliu Mahama, is also alleged to have also doled out some funds, bags of sugar to delegates and opinion leaders in the constituency in the lead up to the primaries. Also gave about 800 bags, Corruption Watch found, to MPP delegates and opinion leaders. There's something that the Corruption Watch found that he did. He's been doing quite often since 2017, by the way. Also distributed 400 knapsacks, 2,400 bottles, weedicides, 600 cutlasses, 400 bottles of anti-snake sprays, and 800 bags of fertilizers to delegates. Now, that tells you how much it means to these aspirants there. Let's go to questioning team. Again, they found that almost all the aspirants, again, were allegedly involved. You know him. He's been on the show a few times. He's the head of the curriculum body part of the Ghana Education Service that designs the curriculum, and he contested, he won. Corruption Watch alleges that he paid 1,500 to each of the about 200 delegates on the night before the elections. Do the calculations for yourself. You see, you're talking about thousands of Ghana cedis spent in there. Again, he didn't do it alone, by the way. He's not the only person who was contesting who was alleged to have done this. Supplied them with food and drinks until the morning of the elections, in the residence there. The incumbent, Joseph Mensah, is also accused of paying 1,000 Ghana cedis to each of their 200 delegates. Also, huge sums of money they spent. It's just jaw-dropping when you look at it. He's alleged to have, again, also giving a half piece of cloth to each female delegate and 2 brand new singlets to each male delegate. He really pays to be a delegate in this time, indeed. And if you go to Ifea constituency, the contest was also between the incumbent MP and the deputy minister for energy, Joseph Kujo. You see him there. Allegations of vote buying again emerging. 300 delegates there, again trying his best to outdo his opponents. Eve of the day of the elections, he allegedly camped about 300 delegates and gave each person 1,500 cedis. Guess what? a 32-inch flat screen Hisense television. Goodness me. This is just mind-boggling to the delegates. Well, you think that he's the only person doing that. No, he's not. Allegedly, by the way, Mr. Kujo, in keeping with an alleged promise to pay to the delegates whatever amount his opponents. So this was a contest to win the primary, but it was a contest also to outdo your opponent in giving as much as you can. Gave them and held a meeting with the delegates in the afternoon of the day after the elections and gave 400 cedis to each of the delegates there. Again, allegedly, again, in this other candidate in the Fia constituency, Dr. Adjoa, 432-inch television to each delegate in that part of the country. So this is something we need to tackle tonight. And after the break, I'm going to introduce my guest. And then we'll hear from the Deputy Maslock CEO. We'll also hear from Mr. Liu Mahama, who will also join me here on PMX. And then we'll get to analyze this particular phenomenon, 4 months on election, how to eradicate it, if that is even possible. Stay with me. And thank you very much for staying with us here on PM Express. A very interesting conversation to have on the back of that revelations that, of course, has got a lot of us wondering what might happen on December 7. Joining me, my guest tonight, Alex Egbefia, NDC Deputy Campaign Manager, Director of International Relations, member of the Functional Executive Committee of the party. I'm grateful that he could join me. He's almost become a regular on my show. I'm grateful to have him on my show. Paul Kwabena Brampa is a Senior Programs Officer, CDD Ghana. Of course, they spearhead the Corruption Watch. Ewald Kwe Ga is a Research Fellow at the Institute for Democratic Governance, IDEC. They've also been doing some work in this area. And of course, Vitus Zing, the man who says it the way as it is, former Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative. Also joining me tonight is Mr. Liu Mahama, who had been accused of also inducing delegates again in Yendi. In fact, it is in Yendi that I start tonight. Gentlemen, I want you to listen to Hajia Abibata Shani Mahama Zakaria. She is the Deputy Maslock CEO. And as I introed and made the points on the corruption ward, she was found to have used her position at Maslock to induce delegates. I spoke to her earlier, and I started by playing to her a gathering at which she addressed MPP delegates and made promises to give them loans that, of course, Maslock was supervising and distributing to those who've applied. Listen.
I'm just a deputy CEO. You all know what I'm coming to seek from you. Apart from the Maslock, I've already given out a lot of things which are not related to Maslock. And if a person wants to go to Parliament, it is not your personal money you will use to bring development to your people. You will have to go to the government and do lobbying to bring development to your people. So whoever comes to seek your mandate to be MP, his or her links with the people in the government, and his or her humility and attitude will put development to his or her people. Though this gathering is not a political rally for me, there's no way we will do this without letting you know why we brought it here. Here is my Northern Regional Manager. He is aware that Maslock gives to a maximum of 5 groups in the Northern region. But I've not regretted the fact that Yendi alone has been honored with 35 groups. If I had not done so, you had the right to blame me because I can't have such an opportunity and not help you, my people.
Madam Zakaria, is that you in that clip there?
Yes, Evans, that's my voice, and that was spoken in Dagbani.
Okay. Now, so what occasion was this?
It was a disbursement ceremony that I supervised, and it is not unusual for me to have been there because I've been to various disbursement functions of Maslow in the Northern region, Upper East region, Upper West region, and even Ashanti region. So my being there at the venue was because I was a deputy CEO for Maslow and not because I was an aspirant for the parliamentary seat in Yendi constituency.
But this particular occasion also had MPP delegates in attendance.
I can't be sure because when people apply for loans at Maslow, we don't go step by step to know who are delegates and who are not delegates. In any case, there were applications that were brought to Maslow, and I personally did not work on the approvals. My duty there was to supervise the disbursement, and it just coincided with me coming from Yendi and me being an aspirant, nothing more.
So why were you telling them then that you knew that Maslow per its protocols only gives to a maximum of 5 groups in the northern region, but because of your intervention, you are going to give as much as 35 in Yendi alone? Why were you bending the rules?
I am not sure who interpreted the Dagbani to you. That's why I initially said that it was spoken in Dagbani. What I said was that before Maslow started giving loans, as far back as 2018, Yendi had received 5 groups, just as any constituency around Ghana. And Yendi was one of the first constituencies to have received those 5 groups. The day of the event, the groups were actually 30 groups and not 35. So whoever interpreted the audio to you, I don't know who did it, but I think the person was deficient in the Dagbani language.
How many groups benefited?
35 groups from 2018 up to now. And I must put on record that in Northern region, Yendi is not the constituency that has the largest beneficiary. Tamale Central, for example, have benefited 117 groups. That is Honorable Inusa Husseini's constituency. When you come to Tamale South, we have 69 groups. And then you go to Navrongo Central, we have 50 groups. That's Upper East. You go to the same Upper East in Pani, we have 55 groups. So if Yendi had 35 groups, I don't think it was abnormal because even within Northern region, Yendi is not the constituency that had the highest number of groups.
Yes, but you were the parliamentary aspirant in Yendi.
That is
and you made a point of telling the gathering that yes, some in the northern region 5 groups, but because of your own ingenuity, you've managed to give Yendi 35.
Evans, I told you initially that I don't know who interpreted the Dagbani to you, and I explained to you what I said. Whatever I said in Dagbani is twisted. I wish you could understand Dagbani and you would listen to the audio over and over, and you would understand what I meant.
Just for clarity, what did you mean?
I told you initially that Maslow, as at the day of the disbursement, the groups were 30. But earlier on, the decision was to give 5 groups to every constituency. And Yendi had benefited 5 groups. And Yendi was one of the first constituencies to have benefited from the 5 groups. That was as far back as 2018. So adding the 30 to the 5 made it 35 groups. So I was making reference to the earlier 5 groups and not the day of the disbursement. And that is why I'm saying that whoever interpreted the Dagbani may be deficient in the Dagbani language.
So as the Maslow CEO who was contesting a primary, you've admitted that when in that meeting, there was some delegates as well.
Obviously, Maslow is for every Ghanaian, and like I said already.
Yeah, but I know it's for every Ghanaian, but I'm talking about MPP delegates, people who are going to vote for you.
When Corruption Watch contacted me, what I said was that if the NPP delegates happen to be part of it, It wasn't for me to know whether someone is a delegate.
So, Madam Zakaria, you're saying that you didn't know that the gathering you were in had MPP delegates?
I would not know.
You didn't know? That.
Of course, what I said was that it was a mixture of delegates and non-delegates.
But you just told me that you wouldn't know, but you're now telling me that there was a mixture of delegates and non-delegates.
Of course, that was what I said.
So you knew there were delegates there?
Of course, they did not. That did not prevent delegates from applying to Maslow. There is nothing in our procedure that debars MPP delegates.
Okay, but just to establish, so you knew you were addressing MPP delegates at this function?
They were not entirely MPP delegates.
Yeah, but you knew at this meeting there were delegates.
We were administering the loan to 750 beneficiaries. Yendi delegates, as at the 20th June, they were 593. And not that which delegates were part of the beneficiaries. I'm not sure the delegates would have even been up to 100. And that is why I'm saying that was not of any particular benefit to me as a person. I was there as an official from Maslow and not as an aspirant for the Yendi constituency.
Okay.
Just as I go to other constituencies to supervise their disbursement.
So having acknowledged that there were delegates there, and obviously from what you said, you knew there were delegates there. You're telling me that I haven't asked my question. My question is, because you knew there were delegates there who were going to vote and decide your fate in the primaries, you're saying that making this case to them didn't enhance your chances of winning the primary?
Maslow was just one of the interventions that any MPP delegate would have benefited. If you listen to me carefully, and whoever interpreted the audio to you will tell you that I mentioned that I had brought several interventions, and Maslow was just one of the interventions. I wasn't looking to Maslow to win my primary.
So that is the Deputy Maslow CEO. Let me bring in my guest, and I'll hear also from the other contender in the race. In fact, he won the race, Mr. Liu Mahama. He's also been accused of doing same. But Mr. Liu Mahama, just hold on for me briefly. Let me bring in first Paul Kwabena Brampa from the CDD. They spearhead the corruption watch. Mr. Brampa, what's your reaction to the Deputy CEO's rebuttal to the findings?
Thank you very much, Vance. Let me say a very good evening to our listeners. This is one of many initiatives that CDD Ghana and have taken up on the platform of CODIO, sometimes in elections, and sometimes we coming together to collaborate with GI, the GACC, other institutions to embark. It's born up of the fact that primaries and elections in Ghana are gradually becoming a monetized venture that if you don't take action against it now and expose some of these things, it will be made part of the pervasive corruption that is going on in the country. So we wanted to bring some of these things up. In fact, we have a special report from 2016 elections that also catalogs some of these things. So the Corruption Watch findings is just collaborating some of the research findings that we've done from abuse of incumbency, from special monitoring of bribery and corruption, and other issues that we've done. So exposing these events just tells our listeners and the viewers what is happening in the political front, and then the things that call for attention, of national attention, for us to start thinking about it.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Vice President, your reaction particularly to what you heard there from the Deputy Maslow CEO?
You know, what struck me first was the example she gave of the Upper East region. Nauru Central is an MPP parliament, has an MP parliamentarian who is who is a minister. Timpani has an MPP parliamentarian who is a minister. So what struck me was that she was not even just working for herself alone, using Maslow just for herself alone, but for colleagues in other parts of the country. People. That purpose. But as for which in 2012, Ghana integrated GSCC and CDD Ghana And so it is not surprising. It has been happening, whether it is NPP or NDC, it happens sometimes even at the assembly level. When it comes to the approval of DCs by assembly members, they demand certain amounts of money and the nominee pays. So as Mr. Brown said, it's very unfortunate that we're doing these things, that we are electing people because they have money, not because we think they're the people that will go and adequately represent us in Parliament. And it's something that we need to address seriously.
And I must say that we had invited the MPP to be part of this. We haven't received a response, and so we'll have a conversation. Mr. Lesegbefia, will you dare cast a stone against her?
I would rather deal with solutions than actually begin to cast stones, because who knows, next week you will be showing some tape involving the NDC. And so if my
I have not known you to throw in the towel this easily.
Well, there are some issues that you don't. I think that vote buying is a Ghanaian phenomenon. I think that it is not exclusive to any one political party. The extent to which it goes varies. And for me, I think that the solution is twofold. One, political parties have to find a way in which to increase the number of people beyond the delegate system, because the smaller the numbers, the easier it is to actually give incentives. But if the numbers are increased to a larger extent, it becomes more difficult to deal with the incentive package. But more importantly, there must be some form of legislation. After some research has been done, for example, in countries like the UK, there's a ceiling on how much you can spend in an election for, say, an MP. And if you overspend, you're actually disqualified from standing. So we can go and do some research in other countries as to how they actually put ceilings on how much can be spent on each at elections at different levels, and then find a system to monitor it. Without doing that, I do not think we would necessarily solve the problem. So twofold solution: one, try and increase the number of people who actually vote, and two, find a way to deal with it by legislation.
And you just jumped to the end of the show, because I was going to devote quite a substantial amount of time to talk about the solutions. But since you've gone there, since you have elected to exercise your rights to respond to the specific issues, should I take it then that it's an admission that it happens in the NDC too?
I think that it's to be naive of anybody, and maybe in the political season, people will be jumping up and down saying, look, make political capital. It's not about political capital. This is an item that actually is getting worse by the day. And as a Ghanaian, I think that we have to find a way to stop it.
Yeah.
Very important people, very useful people in our society will not even stand for an election because of the monetization of the process. And therefore, for me, I would say that the sooner we address it, it happens in the United States where there's a lot of lobbying, a lot of money's going around, but they can afford it. They have a system. Ghana cannot afford this every 4 years. We are going down a ditch. And frankly, it means that before long, and this is why they say politicians are corrupt. How does, you looked at the figures, how does the person afford this? I mean, if the person is not already doing a business and coming from a business background and is able to do, how many of them are in those type of businesses? So exactly how are these things being paid for? But this is the reality. And therefore, if this is the reality, we as a people must say, okay, how do we solve the problem? We in the NDC tried it. I don't think the MPP has, but we in the NDC tried it. We decided to expand our register to bring in others. And then we began to see fraudulent activities in our register, because people quickly registered people who were not even members of the party to ensure that the numbers that voted in a particular direction. So I think that the solution to the problem. That was a good solution to the problem, but we didn't police it well to actually get only NDC people involved. Now with the registration period process that we have, I think it is time for us to revisit it and go down that road at least. But it's also with the district assembly elections, when an MCE wants to get involved, it's not just Maslock. If an MCE wants to get involved in the parliamentary candidates, this thing, then the person who's in charge of the funds in the party will spend out more money, etc. So I think that across the board, CPP, PNC elections, every political party, you can find one example somewhere of some level of good buying. But I must say, and I think that it must be said that each year, the MPP never cease to surprise with the extent to which they raise the bar. So now, by the time we get to our election, the bar is so high, I don't know how we are going to be able to afford it. You know, the bar is, I mean, some of the things that we're being given, I mean, if you're going to be an MP, you might as well forget it.
Well, you finally brought it home. Let me bring in Omar Farouk, who was also accused of buying votes in his constituency. And Mr. Farouk, you were in the Yendi constituency, same place with Madam Abiba Tah, who of course had denied the accusations against her. The allegation against you by Corruption Watch is that you gave about 800 bags of rice to MPP delegates, numbering more than 600. You gave 400 knapsacks, 2,400 bottles of weedicides, 600 cutlasses, 400 bottles of anti-snake sprays, 800 bags of fertilizers to delegates in the Yendi constituency. This is a mouthful. How did you come by the resources to be able to pull this off? Mr. Farouk, can you hear me? Mr. Liu Mama, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you live and clear, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much and good evening to your listeners. First of all, I want to state clearly here that I started doing philanthropism work as far as 2013, after the demise of my late father, the late Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Alhaji Aliu Mahama. Having seen the poverty levels in the northern region, and he always used to say that the north is a deprived place and we shouldn't see ourselves as enemies. So after his demise, I looked at it and he had already established a foundation, which is the Aliu Mahama Foundation, and I also came up with my innovation to form my NGO, which is Partnership for Poverty Reduction. So I started doing every thing that was geared towards helping needy but people in the northern Ghana, not necessarily in Tamale. I do a lot of work. And normally when it's festive seasons, as ritual, when my old man was alive, I started doing donations from 2013, not 2017. We've been helping opinion leaders in Yendi, youth groups, as he used to do. So it was a continuation of what my late dad used to do. And it was through the Aliu Mahama Foundation and also Partnership for Poverty Reduction. And this started way before I even had the ambition to contest any constituency.
Okay, so is it true that you still gave all these goodies to delegates in the lead up to the primaries?
Not necessarily so, but I would say that I started doing this since 2013, every year, 2014, 2015. The recent one was 2017, when Yendi had this issue about Guinea worm invasion. The Partnership for Poverty Reduction, my NGO, as always, we also
Mr. Mama, you've made that point. I'm just asking about 2020, just before the primary. Did you give all these goodies as well?
Yeah, I've been doing it consistently from 2017 to 2020, so it's nothing new out of the blue. And I didn't do it because of the primaries. With or without the primaries, I've been doing it consistently for the past 4 years. And it's part of the arrangement from our NGO, which is Partnership for Poverty. And it has nothing to do with any vote buy. It is something we give to Yendi people. We did a need assessment, and we found out that 80% of people in Yendi are farmers. And every time, not necessarily farmers, chiefs, opinion leaders, we help them with farming inputs. And all these are support that we get from friends across that we have established from my late father and friends, family, and my brothers. And it's something that we've been doing. It has nothing to do with vote buying, or it didn't coincide necessarily with the election, because at this point in time, we were in a farming season, and every time strategically, we try to give these inputs at the time and need that the people have. We have a farmer database, which we have been doing for the past 4 years.
So this is a specific question I'm going to ask. Did you give these goodies to NPP delegates?
No.
No NPP delegate got goods.
What we do is we have, as I told you, PPR, we have a farmer database, and every year we have a database of all farmers in Yendi constituency. So we have the database, and we've been cutting across both villages and in towns. So we have that database, and it's based on that database that we use to share these goodies to farmers.
Okay, so that database is a database of citizens and not necessarily delegates.
Yes, of Yendi constituency.
Okay, did that database you used this year, the last month, did it include delegates?
No, for the past 4 years, as I said, we have a database.
No, I know. I mean, I know you've repeated that a few times, but I'm asking specifically, this particular one that you used to distribute, did that list include delegates?
There could be a possibility of having delegates, but I will not be able to know unless the CEO of PPR, because I'm the founder, and I always make sure that I give them the necessary resources. So I won't be in a position to know, because the CEO of PPR is in Yendi, and he works directly with the people in Yendi, and I will not be able to know the content of delegates or the number of delegates who are really farmers who normally get support yearly for the past 7 years, as I say.
Okay, so as a candidate, as an aspirant going into an election, you are telling me that you have a philanthropic organization, and yet when you're distributing these goodies just before the elections, you never wanted to give, and indeed never gave to a delegate knowingly.
As I said, we do these things. There are a lot of things we've done which is not necessarily even geared to delegates. For instance, in Yendi, the Yendi mortuary for the past 30 years had challenge.
Okay. Did you meet delegates before?
No, I've never. No. I mean, normal. There's a distinction between meeting delegates on the campaign trail and also using these things to convince delegates to vote for me based on what it has been alleged. And there has never been an interface whereby I go and say, take these inputs, collect them, and vote for me. There's nothing of that sort.
Okay. So in your campaigning, did you ever meet delegates as group of people?
Why wouldn't I, Evans? You need to meet delegates day in, day out to sell your message to them.
Yes.
Let them know that
you definitely must. In the meetings with these delegates, did you ever share anything with them?
No. What I shared was to share a message of hope and to tell them what I've been doing for the Yendi constituency, which is visible in the constituency, and they know what I do and what I've been doing consistently for the past 4 years.
You did not
let them know that.
You did not even give them. You did not even give them transportation.
Evans, I did not give anybody any transportation.
not even water to drink when they came to meet you.
Oh, no, nothing of that sort. Yes.
Mr. Segbafi, I see you smiling. What is making you so happy?
The only comment I'll say is chai, and leave it at that. That's the only comment I'll make.
Mr. Lumama, please stay with me. I want to bring in Ewald. Ewald, so what's your reaction to all that you've heard, particularly from Mr. Lumama, and also, give me a reaction to Mr. Lumama first, Ewald.
All right, thank you very much, Evans, and good evening to all viewers. I would also like to commend CDD and partners for this study. It has really brought out something that even though we all suspected, we didn't have much evidence, but this study has brought out that evidence. with the comments by Mr. Aliu, I would say if he says he did not give out anything, I think let's look at what, if it's possible for us to verify, we can do that to see whether indeed he did give something out or not. But now I don't think there's much that we can do beyond what he has said at the moment. But I would like to draw on some important points. The first is to point out that this whole thing about vote buying is as criminal as someone going to steal or going to snatch a ballot box. And that is one thing that we should take very serious. We are very vigilant, we are alert, and we are always looking out for people snatching ballot box. Yet we condone buying of votes. And that's one thing I want all of us to take cognizance of. And as citizens, let's all be vigilant against vote buying. Now, I would also like to look at some of the effects of vote buying on our democracy. Basically, we all know that our democracy thrives on majority rule. And going towards elections, candidates are supposed to come out and share with us what they can do, their policies, their ideas, their track record, and based on that, we vote for them. But if we allow the politicians or political parties to pay us, at the end of the day, can we hold them accountable? No. Number two, we did not vote them based on their competencies or the kind of public services that we expect. It means they have already paid us. And it means for 4 years, we should not expect to see development from them. That's basically the message we are sending.
So that is a big picture, and that is why this is important. But I want to bring in Mr. Vitus Azim. Mr. Azim, now you've also heard from Mr. Aliu Mahama, and of course he is very categorical about. He said he didn't even give water to the delegates. With your experience in working in this field and talking to politicians, a direct question: do you believe it?
Definitely not. I don't believe him. And you see, there's simple ways of looking at these things. The funding. Will he allow us to take a look at his bank statement of the foundation and of his NGO to identify the source of funding that he gets? Will he give us a financial statement, and let's say 2018 or 2019 financial statement to look at and see how he spent? There are simple ways of checking these things. I wouldn't believe that any parliamentary candidate has never given money to delegates. I have had friends who have been involved in these things before. Some have lost, some have won. Those who have lost come back crying. And Sir John said it, fear delegates. And yesterday, somebody else was giving examples of where a lady approached him and said, look, if you want me to vote for you, you need to get me a school to go to, even though her results were very poor. I can never believe any candidate, even including presidential candidates, who say that they have not given money to delegates to vote for them.
Mr. Aliu Mahama, what's your reaction to many who will listen to you tonight and have the same reaction like Mr. Vitus Azim, that I simply cannot believe a word he's saying, that he didn't even give water to delegates?
Yeah, thank you very much. And Mr. Vitus Azim and our senior colleague are all senior respected members in society. But I want to state here that Mr. Azim should also understand that having been established as a person who is very focused in whatever I do, I think that I didn't come into politics because of just to use money to. I've never done that in whatever I do. The Partnership for Poverty Reduction and both the Aliu Mahama Foundation are platforms that I always go and use to source a lot of funding. For instance, Oxford Africa Conference in London 2019, I was invited to London. I was on the same platform with Mo Ibrahim, and I was invited as founder of PPR. And through that, we made a lot of network. In the same way, I was privileged to go to British Parliament, and I was a speaker at the Black History Month, and I sold Aliu Mahama Foundation. And through that, we've got a lot of support. So networking and going for this kind of big exposés in terms of raising and getting source of funding, and the network established by my late father shouldn't be a difficulty for me to be able to use these NGOs to help my people. That is why I started doing this 2013, not necessarily 2020. So I have a mindset of using the NGO and the legacy of my father through his foundation and my own personal foundation, NGO, to help my people. For instance, the Yendi constituency, we had 30 years of mortuary. I used the Partnership for Poverty Reduction to build the Yendi mortuary for the whole Eastern Corridor. It is nothing but benefit to the people of Yendi. You go to Adibo, 30 years, they didn't have water. It's an ancient town. I used the Partnership for Poverty Reduction to do boreholes for them. We've done over 15 boreholes in Yendi through the Ali Mama Foundation and the PPR. And I was not yet an MP. And this started from 2013. So this tells you that I have a vision to develop my place and not necessarily using any form of inducement to give to a delegate. I worked for my success and I worked for my victory. And I'm still working and still using the foundation and the NGO. We are building a presidential library in Yendi for Ali Mama Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
It tells you that.
Yes, Mr. Luma, give me a second. Give me a second. Yes, let me hear from Mr. Azim.
Yes, a second. If he's doing all these good things, why does he want to go to Parliament? Why does he want to go to Parliament? You are serving your people very well. They are admiring it. You are helping alleviate poverty in your area. What is attracting you to go to Parliament?
Can I answer my senior brother?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I think I was born into a family which is fully fledged political background, spanning from my late grandfather, the late Mori Gala, who was a minister of foreign affairs. My daddy was the vice president of the republic. And I believe that I have that same blood in me, which is for humanity.
Okay.
And I believe
so I guess you're saying good. Just because of the sake of time, you're saying that you went in there so you could serve the people. I mean, that's fair. Yes. Stay with me. I want to take a quick break. When I return, I will move into the specifics of what Alex Sebefia started us on about the solutions to this particular problem. I will seek the input of Mr. Brampa. CDD has been doing this work. So how do we fix this ahead of the 2020 election? Should we start one, naming and shaming, possibly two, prosecuting people, because the law can also be used here? Stay with me. My guests on PM Express tonight, we have Alex Sebefia with the NDC, Mr. Liu Mahama with the MPP, a parliamentary candidate for the MPP in Yendi. We have Mr. Brampa with the CDD, Vice President Anti-Corruption Crusader, and Ewald Gar with IDEC, who I think we've lost briefly. I want to come to the conversation about addressing this fundamentally. Mr. Brampa, so what's the point of Corruption Watch when really this has become such an intractable problem we haven't found a solution to? What do you hope to achieve with this substantively? What can we do to fix it?
Evans, thank you very much. I think this is one aspect of corruption in the country that has already taken roots that we need to deal with. And if you monitor the Corruption Watch at CDD, what it's now doing, it's trying to catalog some of these things and follow up to its logical conclusion to make sure that substantive resolutions are secured, sometimes even prepared to take the initiative to take the case to court. So it's a whole establishment of dealing with corruption of its all aspects in the country. For this one, I want to bring out, as you asked, 3 suggestions. Honorable Sebefia has already said one, but for the first point, expanding the electoral college so as to make it impossible for candidates to pay their way through.
I mean, but Mr. Brampa, on that point, the NDC expanded the electoral college. It didn't solve the problem. The MPP did same. The MPP did same too. also expanded, it still hasn't solved the problem.
I was coming there, Evans. I observed on behalf of CODIO, the NPP Congress at Street Fair Center that voted to expand its electoral college. And when we came back to the office, one of the media press that we released was to congratulate them because, as Honorable Sebefia suggested, we thought that was going to make it impossible for people to expand such huge sums of amount. But it kept going on. Even at the national level, that we are dealing with vast constituencies at a presidential level, it goes up, it goes on. So expanding the college will rather increase the cost of politics, as our research has established, that in every single elections, candidates spend around $90,000 in getting their way through, from primaries to, if they qualify for the primaries, to the actual contest in elections. The report was released, I think, last 2 years or so. So that isn't option at all. The option now is, and Honorable Sophia was talking about the law. Yes, we can think about best practices from other countries to see. I was discussing with the Ambassador Francis Chiga, who is a retired diplomat now working with us. And he said in other jurisdictions, they have a period at which you can hold contests. In the national level, presidential and parliamentary elections, they can reduce the months that people can actually do effective campaigning, so as to reduce the number of days that they'll go to the field to increase their cost. They can also reduce the number of even posters. I think the NDC tried that in their last primaries, that people were limited as to how many campaign posters they can have. So some of these things we can have and have it. But if we have all these things and we don't have enforcement mechanisms, that goes with sanctions, there will be no. Talking about law, we have PNDC law 248, the 284 there. We have the criminal code of 1960 to 29. It has some prescriptions to the extent that it prescribes up to 5 years imprisonment. And when you come back from the prison, you are banned for another 5 years from contesting any political position in the country. Have you ever seen anybody in this country being taken to court or vote buying? It's not about having the laws. It's about the enforcement of even existing laws to put faith in the people as to do it. So I will say that we need to think about how we go and monitor some of these things to have sanctions in place so as to serve as deterrent to the people. Without enforcement, we can do all fine laws, we can go and learn from other countries the best practices, but we cannot hold the fort as to how to deal with this problem.
Mr. Azim, here's a dilemma. Assuming that we even want to enforce the law or pass a stronger one, it is the same politicians who are in charge of making sure that enforcement happens. You say the police, yes, but we all know that it's just in name because the politicians wield the power. Isn't this an impossible problem to address? Shouldn't we just accept that it's the norm and move on with our lives and stop pretending about it, that we can fix it?
Well, I don't think that we are pretending. We are refusing to fix it.
But how do you fix it?
With regards to the law, if our institutions work, tomorrow GRA should write to the private people who contested and invite them to interviews to find out what work they are doing, how much, whether they have got tax files and all that. Sharks will go after the public servants who have contested, those in public positions, whether you're a politician or civil, investigate. When you start this, that is a way of enforcing the law. You don't necessarily have to depend on the police to enforce the law. You can at least go after people to pay their taxes, go after people to open their asset declaration forms, to tell us what they got before they occupied official positions and how they came by those monies. Then, of course, we are citizens. It must change. Why should we be demanding that they give us monies for our votes? And the politicians, why do they go out there to make promises when they know they cannot fulfill? A parliamentarian is not a developmental person. You don't go promising roads and hospitals and all that when you don't have the capacity to do that. So it requires a change of attitude, both from the citizens and the politicians, but also from the institutions. Shrike must work. GRA must work. People must pay tax, and you must find out what work they do. So I don't think that is enough to say that we cannot enforce the law. If we depend on the politicians, yes, we cannot enforce the laws, but we set up institutions for whom we are paying. So they should also sit up and do their work. It is enough for SHRAC to take this report and do the necessary investigations. At least select a few and show them a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Sagbafia, is there the political will to address the problem?
No, and I think that the shortest answer is no, because the laws, I agree with my colleagues when they talk about enforcement and sanction. Laws exist. We made this very point, that's why I was smiling, when they were talking about the vigilante law. Anything vigilantes do is actually a criminal offense under the criminal code. And you simply have to arrest them, put them before court under the criminal code, prosecute them, and if convicted, sentence them. Instead, we've gone to pass a new law for that purpose. Is it being, what is happening right now? Can't we see that vigilantes have woken up and have started working? An unfortunate boy was stabbed just yesterday. So we have situations. And when I spoke about the two issues I mentioned, which was expanding the number of people voting, I didn't want it in isolation. You have to do it together with legislation. It's a starting point, because if, like you said, we throw our hands up in exasperation, that cannot be the answer. If it's just to even reinforce the point, do it. And then bring the political parties together and begin to, because the truth of the matter is that they are feeling the pinch themselves, I believe. For those who can play that game, fine. The delegates themselves don't help the situation, because as far as they are concerned, they are appointed people will not assist them. The only time they ever see them in their mind is when there's an election.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take as much from you as I can when you need me, and I get it.
Yeah, I mean,